Hello and welcome to Dice Punks, a tabletop role-playing podcast where we focus on playing full campaigns in less well-known systems. This week in episode 17, our wandering nobilis finally return to Fermata in hopes of a bit of peace and quiet. Hello and welcome. I'm Adam, your friendly neighborhood game master, and joining me are...
Drew, who is playing Dosktier, Regal of Nothing, and a guy who can't even.
I'm Robin, and I'll be playing Lyssa Crate, the weary and wary Duchess of Fury.
I'm Dez, and for the first time in a while, I will be playing Ramnet, the prophet of the obsidian god and increasingly central municipal figure.
As we'll get to much more in depth in just a moment. So thank you. And before we get started, let's briefly recap any character stat growth and I think it's Ramnet's turn for a recap of our previous episode.
Well, the first thing is that I have a thing to roll.
You do have a thing to roll, please. Grace us.
So that is a pair of ones, which is minimally sufficient to get me an experience.
You do get a bonus experience. And with that, I think that's probably our only XP anything for this session. So when you're ready, Ramnet can recap in his own way.
Yes, I'm staging a coup. Since our heroes, yours generally and mine in very particular, left Fermata, things have changed. It is an accelerating place, this binary city, speeding to become whatever it is that the obsidian god decrees, and won't tell us. The city never quite settles at the best of time, but lately it feels like even the quiet city is full of jarring noise and demands upon my time. The acolytes appear to have decided that I have decision-making capacity and authority, particularly... Well, I'll get into that later. I've had to move my office from my home and into the manifestation so that I'm better able to keep people waiting without worrying about the intrusions upon my space. They come with questions, and I suppose it is my lot since time escapes me. In any event, since this place became my city. No performances for me, since I found myself a churchman. No dalliances either, since the time that Dask departed, which itself caused a certain amount of strain on some of my connections about town. Just one more strain in the symphony of tensions playing out in the absence of the ennobled. Dask and Lyssa, though, are not the only missing. Evine has been also difficult to pin down, or otherwise keep to task, and that further complicates matters. Not only because, as the mayor, she oversees many and a great many things, it also imbalances the settling mantles of power around here. I've had to step up to take the slack left in her wake. Reaching out to her is as fruitful as trying to individuate an acolyte. She does reappear from time to time, which is as frustrating as her departures. She sends a note to me in the manifestation to let me know that she's got this or that matter handled when I've been dealing with it, often without her guidance, for some time. That I needn't worry about this thing I've spent effort working on without instruction. Handling things. And all the while, my petitioners are waiting. The supplicants have been increasing in number, in speed and proportion, although hopefully without relation to the increase in those terrors of the omnipresent darkness. So here we are.
Indeed, thank you for that recap. Astute listeners will note that it did not include events in Diamacor, and
Because
well, how could it, right? Ramnet hasn't been there.
why would I know anything about that?
But indeed, we will hopefully have cause to refresh your memories about that as well. But in the meantime, we rejoin Ramnet in the early part of his work. We'll use the word day euphemistically. Seated in sort of a prominent place at the front of the manifestation with supplicants lining the pews, and a fellow who gives his name as Paltry Swethingen, making an awkward, sort of humble stance, not quite an obeisance, at the foot of the altar, as the acolytes sort of guide him to where he should, as they seem to signal, kneel. And, well, he seems to be coming apart somewhat under their attentions. He is very twitchy, seems either feverish or maybe blushing, as he states his case. He waits for the acolytes to return to their sort of waiting positions in the wings, and then furtively motions you to come closer.
I'd like to suggest that instead of, like, me standing at an altar or something, like in the middle of a nave, to the degree that we're comparing the manifestation to a cathedral, like, given the nature of a lot of the questions and petitions and so on of the supplicants, consider instead, like, an office or a side chapel or something, and everybody else waits their turn in the pews.
The acolytes did not go along with it when you tried it.
Damn.
They steadfastly guided people to this arrangement. They don't ever, like, bodily push or press or drag you. You just simply can't get your job done if you don't kind of play by their rules, because people tend to trust that they are following the Obsidian God's will, and so you try to call people in from kind of this central seating and altar place, but it slowed you down probably 30 or 40% to handle it that way. And
it has
every
become
day,
a game of numbers.
Oh, it certainly has. And every day when you would go into the manifestation, the chair that you had left at the desk in the office off to the side had been moved by the acolytes back to the altar. And it is not a light chair. So eventually, with no small amount of grumbling and dirty looks at the acolytes, you have tried to make the best of it. Fingers crossed you can assert your own arrangement at some point, but for the moment, if you wish not to be hounded day and night, this is the best solution. So he does motion you forward, and you kind of, get a little bit closer so that he can speak low. And as we talked about, nothing in the manifestation echoes, so you actually have a fair bit of privacy.
Sure.
If he's not being loud. And indeed he's not. He murmurs to you, stammering, clearly embarrassed. Lord Prophet, well, it's just that ever since I saw the acolytes, I can't get them out of my mind. And just... I think there's one in particular that fancies me. and I just have to be able to pick them out, and, well, I thought maybe, since you work with them, you'd know, what do they like? What would be a good gift? I've never seen one with flowers, and we really only have the one kind of flower. But I've also never seen one eat or drink, so I don't know how dinner or drinks would work. Maybe a robe? I'm just not sure. Please. It's all I can think about.
I will pause and work to maintain sufficient composure, because really appearances are a lot of this job. I think you're missing the first step in this process of wooing an acolyte, Paltori. Sorry, it is Paltori, is it?
Correct.
That was in character.
Oh, that's right, sir.
While the acolytes, individually or collectively, and it is often hard to distinguish these things, I fear that I must give you the bad news that even I have difficulty in the extreme telling one from another. Your first step is likely to involve figuring out how to tell them apart, such that the one who fancies you is not mistaken for one whose affections lie elsewhere. Consent in all of this is compulsory, and
he nods vigorously.
Thus, it is of greatest import to ascertain that, and I think that there lies the first step toward figuring out what that individual acolyte might want. For you would have to be able to distinguish them from the others.
He is nodding slowly, now looking thoughtfully. He says, right you are. Well, thank you, my Lord Prophet. I'm sure I'll be back, but he gulps audibly as he glances at one of the acolytes over to his left and says, in the meantime, I better be gone before I faint. And gives you kind of a hasty bow that almost like clocks you in the chin when he's coming back up as you try to like back away from whispering distance, and hurries down the steps again, leaving his
best of luck, and also, a hasty blessing, such as it weren't, of the Obsidian God.
Yeah, he leaves his little offering there in the bowl set aside for this purpose, and the next supplicant takes his place. The next person is an imposing figure. 6.5 feet, broad frame, lithe, compact musculature, unusually sort of sun-kissed complexion for somebody in Fermata, where, I haven't seen the sun in a bit.
Where there's no sun to do the kissing?
Indeed. Well said. They, sort of cut a somewhat androgynous figure, being, slim in some places, broad in some places, kind of stylable and haircut deliberately indeterminate, and giving a very hasty sort of formality of an obeisance, says, my Lord Prophet, stops, looks really frustrated, and sort of then just sighs in defeat and says, I'm the Hammer of Wenches. It's not my name. I don't know how it got started, but it's all anyone will call me anymore, no matter how much I beg them not to. I think it might be some kind of a joke. No one can understand anything that I say other than the Hammer of Winches when I give my name, and sure enough, the next thing they say is gibberish. It sounds like even though that's clearly not the movement that their mouth makes.
Out of character, Adam, it's very important to me to know whether or not, like, their mouth makes bad anime dubbing movements.
Their mouth looks like they might be saying something, but it's kind of impossible to tell what. It certainly does not look like it's saying the sound that you hear. But they sort of slump their shoulders and sigh and just says, I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what to do about it. No one, even people who've known me for years, will call me anything but the Hammer of Winches.
It takes some amount of effort to not suggest introducing them to Lyssa.
Yes!
You can find them on your own, dearie. I will pause and sort of make a sympathetic face. And this sort of joke is forbidden by the laws of the Obsidian God, so it cannot be a joke. Instead, consider that your name may have been taken. And the only one who could do that would be the Obsidian God. So perhaps you should endeavor to demonstrate your worthiness of that taken name, that it might be returned. To that end, I recommend that you present yourself to the next acolyte you come across upon leaving the manifestation, and request a task to perform for them, in the name of the Obsidian God.
They look, at first, kind of startled and alarmed as you talk about their name being taken, and then a little bit thoughtful as you give your advice, and then they say, well, I suppose I did always fancy an adventure. They sigh in kind of a resigned way and stand up, nod, and say, thank you, my Lord Prophet. I hope to be able to introduce myself properly next we meet.
I look forward
and
to
give
it,
you kind of
and I wish you the comfort of a calling.
They offer you a wan, shaky smile and just casually toss a small pouch into the offering bowl and make their way down the central aisle and out of the manifestation. The next person in line looks like somebody who expects rocks to fall on them at any moment. A woman of sort of early middle years, maybe, dressed relatively plainly. She makes a really quite overly elaborate obeisance and kneels at the altar and says in a quavering voice, greetings, my Lord Prophet. My name is Altan Brembury. She looks left and right and then lowers her voice and says, I think my children are plotting against me. I know they hate me, but I'm trapped in a house with people who were trying to kill me. And she breaks down into tears.
I will ask if she is married, and how old the children are.
She nods and she says, well, yes, I am married. But, well, my wife does not take my worries seriously, and she's gone for work so much, and she just doesn't see the way they look at me and the way they whisper and laugh to each other when she's gone. Well, They look so innocent. They seem like they're playing, but I know they mean me harm. Especially my middle one.
And what leads you to believe that?
Well, if you could just see his eyes when he looks at me. They're so hostile, so knowing, far more so than a child of 3 should be.
And how old are the other two? I say, working to keep my composure.
If you think it matters, my lord, my oldest is 6, and my youngest was born some 3 months ago.
Ramnet blinks quickly several times in succession, because that is more socially acceptable than an outburst of, what the... Yes.
Can I ask what a blink looks like for Ramnet at this stage?
It's not visible from the outside, I can tell you that.
There are voids, and then there's a different void, and then it's the first void, and then the different void, and then...
Gotcha. Strange sort of
I think from the outside it mostly looks like the smoking void, like it just kind of like changes direction like smoke does in the wind a little bit. Yeah. As far as Ramnet's concerned, he's just blinking normally. That's what it feels like. But
your children should not hate you, so long as you give them no reason to hate you. They should not harm you if they be faithful to the obsidian god. If you give them no reason to seek your harm, I am not suggesting here that any of this is your fault. I am simply suggesting that children love their parents as a general matter, of course, unless they are given reason to not. And perhaps the reason has not come from you if your suspicions be true, but love your children, and that love should be returned. And it should be known that any harm to children raised in the care of the obsidian god is generally revisited upon its perpetrator. For the obsidian god seeks an increase in their faithful, and woe betide any who interfere with that. This should be both protection and warning.
Alteon sort of cowers during your whole response there and sort of shudders when you finish, and then looks up at you, fear in her eyes, and says, "Of course, my Lord Prophet, I will do my best to raise them in the faith and to love them. If anything happens to me, please tell my wife." And then bursts into tears, flinging her gift onto the altar and running from the manifestation.
Ramnet feels kind of bad about that one, but also like, really? Really? A 3-month-old.
The neck
intent upon murder.
It seems unlikely.
Last I checked, this was not a schlocky horror movie. Last I checked.
Well. Ha 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 ha! What? Schlocky horror movie? What do those words mean?
I set him up, he knocks him down.
The next supplicant is in the process of standing up to approach the altar when a youth of maybe middle teens sort of pushes open one of the doors of the manifestation, this eerily quiet swing of a massive obsidian slab, and shouts undecorously to a friend who is presumably somewhere in the line of supplicants, "Come quick, the statue's changed again, it's a pillar now!" And then runs off.
Are the Acolytes bringing the next one forward, or am I free to also go to the square where there's now a pillar?
The Acolytes have not changed their position or their demeanor at all.
I will excuse myself.
You are not the only one in the process of leaving the manifestation at this point. Several of the supplicants seem to feel that curiosity is more important than whatever their supplication was. Some of the others look a little bit disgruntled, but again, the Acolytes make no move to interfere, so they go toward the entrance where there is a small stand with a large book on it, and proceed to scribe their names so that they do not lose their place in line. A system that you kind of invented out of sort of, we'll call them material suggestions that the Acolytes left, like the stand and the book and the pen. And you hurry out of the manifestation and towards the Statue Plaza. It is not super close, but it's a very straight shot, and the crowd is definitely moving with you at this point. The statue changing, well, not having happened since the last time that the Nobilis returned to Fermata, so presumably they're about to be back again. At least that seems to be the general consensus. And just as you and probably a group of about 200 to 300 people roll up on the Statue Plaza, you see this pillar standing where the statue once stood. It's quite large, both in diameter and in height, and it has sort of a spiraling series of images, from the base to the top, seeming to tell some kind of tale of events that took place while the Nobilis were out of the city. You can also see that the plaza, as you have grown somewhat used to, is bedecked in these silver flowers that it has become in vogue amongst people who live in the neighborhood nearest the Statue Plaza to cultivate. You are, I should also note, moving through the quiet city on your way here, and so there is crowd noise, but it is relatively hushed. Thus, when the gate bangs open, it is quite a loud and startling sound, and there is a moment's utter silence as the echo has died away and everyone waits to see the return of Dask and Lyssa. They do walk in a moment later, though, looking somewhat worse for wear, travel-stained, somewhat bloody.
Yeah, how much blood is on
Most notably, I think in this case there are a few injuries in evidence on both Dask and Lyssa that have some blood around them. Lyssa has quite a bit of spatter in various places on her.
Thus
but
you can tell that it's probably
most
not hers.
Yes. You can the thing that draws your attention the most, though, is a small woman, maybe even child, that Lyssa is holding in her arms as though a toddler sort of sleeping on her shoulder, who seems to be dressed in midnight blue travel clothes and leathers. You can see where there are sort of twin daggers in sheaths crossed at the small of her back. She seems unconscious, and she seems, well, covered in blood. It's not quite the exact description, because it's not like Carrie where it was dumped on her from above. But there is a lot of spatter and stain on her, even from the angle that you have.
An interruption to note for the listeners, because you cannot see us, even though we're all on video chat with each other. As Adam was describing the wounds, such as there weren't really, it seems, on either of our nobles. They themselves were displaying them and trying very hard to not smirk audibly, particularly in the case of Lyssa.
So, to clarify, both Dask and Lyssa do have small injuries. In game terms, both have taken some killing damage. Neither of them seem to be debilitated or in danger due to these injuries. But they definitely look like they've been in a fight.
I have 2 killing to my head.
Sorry?
I have 2 killing to my head.
That is true.
So you have
I did not describe it.
This guy. Sure.
Yeah. There is probably blood kind of caking one side of each of your heads, and I'm going to go with maybe like a surface, but definitely not small wound in Dask's side, rib, cage, somewhere there. The sort of thing that hurts a lot and that you definitely want to get looked at, but, well, you have not had a chance to stop yet. And for you guys, it really has only been maybe an hour since the end of that fight. Maybe a little bit more, because there was the time waiting for people to assemble around the statue after Dask rang the bell. But it hasn't really been very long at all. So, you're both still kind of... You're probably in the stage of feeling that deep bone weariness that comes with the ebb of adrenaline after...
A lot of it.
A physically and emotionally taxing, event. But, like, coming into Fermata, you don't feel revitalized, but you just feel like tension drain out of you. You can actually, if you're watching carefully, see the way that Lyssa is holding Apatea. Like, she sort of relaxes her grip a little bit and just, like, holding Apatea up rather than, like, clutching her close. The return to Fermata feels, if not restorative, then soothing. About 3 heartbeats after you guys walk in, you walk in, you see the flowers and the pillar and the crowd and kind of like, have to react. But before you can really be like doing anything specific as you take all this in, there is a subdued cheer from the crowd. You are in the Quiet City. But, it's sort of like the roughly the sound you get when a professional golfer finishes a hole very impressively, right? So not just the golf clap, but rather the, sort of subdued clap with like woo noises, from a few people.
Polite enthusiasm for the returning heroes.
Yeah. It is, on the one hand, kind of gratifying, but also, like, very strange. So yeah, you come in, you see this pillar with the most prominent carving facing you, being of the two of you fighting heroically while an evilly grinning Apatea readies to stab you both in the back, and the crowd kind of cheering quietly, and silvery flowers bedecking the plaza around you. You're tired. It hurts.
This is about the point at which Ramnet not so much impacts as just like arrives at Dask and pulls him into an embrace.
I return it enthusiastically, and was at the moment I was embraced squinting at the pillar to see if I could figure out what was going on with it, and my attention snaps to Ramnet, and I say, I cannot begin to tell you how good it is to see you.
Yes, that.
We may have an urgent matter on our hands, not to distract, but her, I point at the pillar, that's not accurate. She needs help.
Is that her?
Yes, the very same, although not precisely the same.
Again, for the
Apatea,
listener.
the nobilis sensation.
Again, for the listeners,
Yes.
both Dask and Ramnet are pointing.
Mm-hmm.
With
Hopefully the pointing is a little audible.
With varying enthusiasm and flusteredness, but both of us pointing.
Indeed.
Well, do you need medical care? Does she need medical care? Like, what is...
Yes.
Okay. I will walk us through the crowd with the force of, get the hell out of our way. And take us...
I am enjoying the officiousness of this more than I would like to admit to myself.
The crowd parts very, very easily, very willingly before you as you leave the plaza. You, are kind of grateful that you're in the Quiet City for this, because people basically just kind of like give little bows and murmurs as you pass and open up for you. A lot of curiosity. Ramnet is probably the one to spot this. Dask certainly normally would, but a little bit out of things. Lyssa, you're pretty distracted in this case, and not quite as keen to collective subtleties as opposed to subtleties of an individual in the best of times, so you may not pick up on it. But Ramnet, you note that a great degree of intense curiosity is being focused on Lyssa's cargo. And as you walk through, you see that accompanied by acolytes, there are about the three most proximate to the plaza, sort of healers, medics, medicine men and women, a variety of specific skill sets here, but kind of being not hustled, but briskly walked towards the plaza. As you come free of the crowd, they start moving you toward kind of the nearest of their establishments. And the next, hour or two, is taken up mostly with the kind of thing that you would expect from triage. What happened? How bad is it? Does this hurt? What are your explanations for the kind of help that a patient needs?
The first thing I say is probably, she is a noble. I should mention, and I'm not trying to jump the line, although as a practical matter we should. I mean, if that is physiologically relevant, she's not only a noble, but one not from here. This may be something you've never seen before. That's exciting.
It is something no one here has ever seen before, in fact.
We're not entirely sure what's going on, just that she is not conscious.
If she looks like she was
if
she looks like she was in a battle, that's because she was. But she came out of that more or less fine. This is something else.
A relative, the youngest of the three healers, the acolytes, corralled, sort of upon laying a patient down, looks at the massive sort of combined singular bloodstain from her chin down her neck and collarbone, across her chest, down across her navel into her, sort of finishing at a point around her belt. Sort of looks at that, probes a little bit for a wound, and goes, "Not to be indelicate, Lord and Lady, but..."
I gesture as though, I can solve your problem. Of course. She drinks blood.
And as you're saying that, I am sending an acolyte out for coffee.
The acolyte gives you an extremely grave and serious bow that you can't help but feel might be a little sarcastic.
I am so
and
used
goes
to
for
physical
coffee.
sarcasm from the acolytes now, it doesn't even faze me anymore.
And the younger of the three healers to whom Dask has said this almost goes cross-eyed for a moment as a rapid flurry of reactions crosses her face. And then after a relatively substantial pause, just goes, "Oh," and gets back to what she was doing. And in relatively short order, Dask, Lyssa, the two of you have been cleaned up, sutured up, bandaged up, given some painkillers. One of the healers gives you some packets of tea with stern instructions to drink it at bedtime because you need your rest. And they agree that Apatea should stay with them until she wakes up.
I don't think we object to that. I
No.
think we ask to be alerted as soon as she is conscious, or if anything, if there's any way we can help, I suppose is the way I would say it.
Yes, and I stress that she, despite her tendencies in terms of libations, she is a friend and not a foe.
Yes, that context was purely medical. I'm not sure we'd be standing here if it wasn't for her. So, yes, a friend indeed.
They assure you that they will look out for her, keep her best interests in mind. I'm realizing here I was going to look at it, but both of you are at Realm 2, and between the two of you currently have one Realm Miracle Point, because one of the things that Realm would allow you to do at a sufficiently auspicious and powerful miracle would be to just, like, heal people. Realm, you can do anything that is miraculously possible so long as you can pay for it. It does not have to be within your domain or under the auspices of aspects. You just have control over the chancel. But at the moment, the highest you could manage is a lesser preservation, which would help if Apatea's life was in serious danger, but at the moment it doesn't appear that way. You've seen her fall unconscious for unclear reasons before. And you're not sure how much divinations and ghost miracles would help you. But if you guys happen to, I just wanted to bring that to your attention because, well, we're back in the chancel.
And for us as well as for
That's
the
what I meant
listener,
to say.
that means, without spending points, up to a level 2 would be a lesser divination. So we could do a ghost miracle or we could find something out.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe as I'm saying, let us know when she's awake. I somehow know that I'll just know that.
Yeah, is there a way to make a lesser divination looking for something in the future? I don't know.
Huh.
Basically, miraculously, what you can do is set up a baby monitor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly like you hear what's going on there, but basically, imagine if you had tied a string to Apatea's finger and then tied the other end to a dangling bell so that it would ring when she moved her finger. You can basically do that using a lesser divination because, well, you can make a constant miracle in Realm. It won't work if you step outside of Fermata, but, as long as you're within Fermata, yes, you can know that.
Divine baby monitor sounds like a solid plan, yes.
Yeah, I was thinking like a personal assistant, like, Maud, remind me when Apatea wakes up. Send me a notification to these devices.
A voice booms from the darkness saying, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
No.
There would be no I'm sorry.
No, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true. No. Too many polite, non-divine personal assistants for me, you're right.
I think Mott's version of that would be, this is beneath our concern.
I would love it if my personal assistant said that shit to me when I told it to set
Right?
an alarm for a meeting tomorrow.
I would definitely trade my Alexa. I had to whisper it because she's in the other room. to speak with Mott's voice.
Because
She would just kick in the door to ask you what you needed.
Yeah, that would be terrifying.
This is beneath our concern is also my new out-of-office auto replies.
see, I think the proper divine, invocation, if we're not going full Mott, would be something on the order of, "Why hast thou summoned me?"
There we go.
Just put all of the things that personas say in Persona 5 when you fuse them into a hat and draw one out.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's more or less what you get.
Sounds right.
In any case. So, the two of you are as treated as you're going to get, and what that basically looks like is that when you rest, one of your killing will turn to shock. And then the next time you rest, any of your shock goes away. And one of your killing turns to shock, and so on and so forth. Should probably not be, more than five nights sleep for you to be fit as fiddle, if I have my math correct. So, now that Apatea is settled and you have your divination set, and Ramnet has coffee.
And anybody else who needs it, be they ennoble or surgeon, also has coffee. Hopefully.
The healers politely decline.
I enthusiastically accept, but drink with less aplomb than the first time, having learned some portion of my lesson.
I also accept, but I toss it back because apparently that's my only speed at drinking.
Oh no!
I'm mid sip as she's doing that, so I can't quite object. But then I realize, she's bigger than I am. Whatever.
Indeed. So the three of you are firmly but politely ushered from the medic's quarters, because, well, there's no more medicing to be done on you. And you find yourself in the streets of the quiet city near, but not in, the Statue Plaza once more.
Thank you. This is to Ramnet for helping. You were right there. We needed you, and we were in a daze. I don't know where we would have wandered to, so thanks.
Of course. You realize I missed you too, yes?
Of course. I knew that. I'm still relieved to hear it, but I knew that. Of course.
And how convincing is he?
Should I roll for that?
Let's do it. Let's see.
I'm all for
that's
how
be...
much of a mess is Dask rolls. Those are, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're a lot of fun. I will let it be a roleplay decision on your part, Dask, whether that is charm plus graces or charm plus lie.
Oh, it's lie. Yeah. So that's 5 dice.
Do know that you will need to, because you are in less than amazing shape right now, you will need to take a penalty die, which I think is the first time we've done this.
Okay.
Basically what this means is that you add a die to your roll and you drop the highest one.
Got it. Okay. So this is 6 dice, but the highest one is Kaputski. Okay.
Correct.
So, jettisoning the highest die, which was a 9, of course. I have... I'm sorry, the highest was actually a 10. And I am left with no matches.
Oh, no.
Great success.
Do I have to roll my presumably sense plus empathy, Adam?
Nah. You are much better rested and much more focused than they are.
I drop the coffee and no clip through the world and disappear.
And I am just left standing there going, the hell did he go? Bring him back.
Rewinding to things that actually happened. So yes, Dask does a Dask, but less convincingly than usual, because I'm trying to think of a good way to come up with an analogy for those of us who have never been stabbed. in a melee before, but
I'm sure that we have one or two listeners who've never been stabbed in a melee. It's polite to mention to include them.
This is sort of like, I think too, when I was living in Chicago and was riding the commuter train back to my apartment from downtown as Lollapalooza was finishing up, and you just saw all of the people leaving Lollapalooza that just looked like their souls had left their bodies. They had been awake for 3 days, drunk and high and freaking out in the hot summer sun, in the park downtown. Yelling and screaming and dancing and sweating, and they just looked like their bodies had given out on them. That's pretty much how you feel, except you also have 2 major lacerations.
Just
no big deal there, yeah.
No, that's fine. The lacerations are temporarily nothing. So I probably say something. So I very unconvincingly attempt to say that I pretty much like I just did, I suppose. I say, that I wasn't worried at all, and of course you missed me. Of course, I've hardly been thinking about it.
I will just reach out and put my hand on the middle of his back and just start rubbing like a small circle there as we walk.
I do not immediately stop gibbering, but the gibbering slowly dissipates, both in speed and in volume, as I feel the hand on my back.
Are you going anywhere in particular currently?
Just wandering. I'm following wherever they're going and acting like I'm not paying attention and silently squealing whenever I see affection.
Lyssa ships it.
You know it.
Exactly. I think I am not steering us in anywhere in particular, as it does not seem that there is anything immediate that needs doing, and I am in no particular hurry to get back to the manifestation. Ramnet is not always a good employee of the Obsidian God, as it turns out.
Indeed. So you walk for a while, and I make this as make this suggestion as something that seems likely to happen under the circumstances, but feel free to override me if not. It seems like this might be a time when Dask and Lyssa might begin to fill Ramnet in on what has transpired during their, travels.
I dare say so. Yeah, so we start with describing Diamakor.
Yes.
Not being sure whether Ramnet even is familiar with the place or even aware of its existence.
Or even sure of
both
Ramnet's,
are hard nose.
I'm not even sure of Ramnet's literacy when it comes to the various metals and substances that I saw them working with there at their forges, but I start on that tirade right away.
We both give levels of detail that are not helpful, right? Like I'm going off on the rich cultural history, and Lyssa is talking about metallurgy, and whether any of that means anything to Ramnet is.
And I'm just waiting for a break in both of these discussions that are happening at me to pause and ask, where is this place? Like, geographically speaking.
Well, if you were
I
on
point.
I point at her pointing. I try to do the math as though there's some way to figure out whether that's accurate, and then I sort of brush off the thought. If you know where the Salt Shoals are, if you were there and you were looking away from Taraxis, more or less, and then you just kept going where I thought there might be nothing, apparently there's something. A great many things, actually. As I'm saying this, I remember the sea voyage, and it occurs to me for the very first time that we have abandoned the ship, the crew, and the captain that got us to Diamakor. the having been stabbed or the having been to Lollapalooza feeling returns. And I turn to Lyssa and say, should we be worried about her, them, that?
Oh. I didn't think about that.
I should mention, we only got there because Lyssa's the other Lyssa, the Lyssa that is not Lyssa. Does Ramnet know Mavia?
Sorry.
We've talked about Mavia.
What?
No? Okay. It may in fact be impossible to get there under normal means. We only got there by means of Lyssa's the thing that is not Lyssa. Mavia, by the way, has a name, not that you should necessarily plan to meet and shake hands. We only got there because Mavia met another divine entity and they hit it off, and that allowed for a safe sea voyage. So in the absence of Mavia, I'm not sure the ship that conveyed us there is going to find its way back.
I think it'll just take them longer, right?
I suppose they know the way.
Yeah, they just won't be on top of a...
Hey, Adam.
Whatever that was.
I have a terrible question for you, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Does Fermata have a harbor? That can...
It does not.
So it cannot be reached by ship in perfect darkness.
Not that you're aware of.
That's a really good thought. By which I mean a terrible thought.
At least a dangerous thought.
Yeah, fast travel trading.
At what cost?
Too much.
Imagine the tariffs.
Oh, the mind shudders at the very thought.
I just picture, religiously affiliated sort of customs personnel down at the harbor going, right, so that was 3 tons of cotton and 1 of sugar, so your total due to unload is your soul. But
I think
no
that the Obsidian God would demand something more useful, such as some number of years of service, but yes.
Yeah, quite probably, but it is not as immediately comical.
I'm picturing like a really like prosaic like TSA looking sign that says, this line, if you have things to declare, the price will be terrible.
Is there perhaps anything that Ramnet is in particular trying to ask Divine or find out in this conversation? Or shall we settle for the slightly like out of character broad strokes version of what he finds out from Dask and Lyssa?
Mostly I'm trying to figure out, 1, that they're okay, for loose definitions of okay that include them healing. 2, that Dask in particular is okay, because he sure as hell doesn't seem like it. And 3, what the entire deal with Apatea is.
Assuming we're leaving in the stuff about the ship, this then leads me to another very brief breakdown about Uncle Melly, who I've probably never explained to Ramnet before.
Nope.
I explained that we secured the ship from my uncle on the strict understanding that we would have some trade goods to exchange, and if that ship doesn't come back, then he won't be surprised, but it won't be good news.
He also might think that Dask and I are betrothed. Sorry about that.
He almost certainly does think that.
It was a joke.
I mean, these things happen. Just continuous blinking that wavers the smoke.
Skull blinking. Now that the ship, if the ship is gone, then the ship is gone. Ships disappear all the time, especially in uncharted waters. But this deception won't stand. I'm putting a pin in it right now. You're gonna meet my uncle, and I'm gonna introduce you. And God's is my witness. We're gonna have a pleasant dinner.
That all sounds lovely. I think that it should be done only after the ship has gotten back to your uncle.
Reasonable. Sure,
so that
of course,
any
of course.
dinner had with him would indeed be pleasant.
Pleasant is, I will admit, a high bar. But sure, yes, okay. We aim high so that we can achieve... Anyway, so yes, we'll bring the ship back, then we'll have dinner. I feel like there's something else you want to know about, though. Apatea, right?
Just lots?
Sure. Well, I think, in a sense, your colleagues... She wore sort of a religious sort of a garb when first we met her. Different god, obviously, but she seems to be, in addition to being a noble, some sort of... How would you describe it, Lyssa? A religious leader to the people?
A muse?
Muse works, yes. Certainly inspiring. And she... Well... Her domain is sensation. That was interesting.
Very interesting.
I've tasted the ripe burst of color. I've felt the shifting contours of sound upon my fingertips.
Her goddess communicates more, but also less than the big they them Elstairs.
Those two are definitely also colleagues, although I doubt they'd get along.
This is a lot of information that is not all of it easy to parse. I suppose the big remaining questions are, why is she here? And several stemming from whatever might be your answers.
Well,
she collapsed. Best I can tell. I was also unconscious for a good deal of time, but that's not terribly uncommon after Mavia takes over.
It occurs to me that Lyssa may not know this. She was saying something about how her goddess made her do something that she didn't want to do, perhaps for the first time, or the first time she could remember, that she'd been pressed into something cruel or brutal. Not having ever seen her fight before, I'm not sure what that could have been referring to, but it seemed possible that the injury being done to her was being done to her by, well, her deity. So I suppose we just both thought getting her far away and to a realm where we had perhaps a bit more purchase was the best we could do.
Okay. And I assume you know the nature of her superior.
Something of it.
But it sounds like...
Doesn't respond well to criticism, in my experience.
Do they ever?
Very moody and unpredictable, perhaps, too.
I was more speaking of names, but given the power of...
Nyx.
No,
I'm extremely happy all of a sudden to be able to provide a concrete detail. Nyx.
Probably best to not repeat that, given, as I was saying, the power of names.
Oh. I perform a ghost miracle, and any very slight echo of the name, which there probably isn't much of since we're in the Quiet City, gets sucked into nothingness.
Done.
I don't even know if that helps solve the problem. Does the name, which I will not repeat, ring a bell?
Nothing even from lore? Okay.
No.
Well, if the land is unknown, it makes some degree of sense that the deity would be as well, I suppose.
Sure.
They seem to want the folks of that land to believe they're the only deity.
Monotheism. How quaint.
Yes.
It certainly is worth noting here that Taraxis does not have anything approaching a unified religion. The observation of rights to the Obsidian God is probably a plurality. of religious rites conducted, but you all have not had cause to have to experimentally test the veracity of the existence of any of the other spirits and deities that are sometimes venerated, propitiated, worshipped, or called upon in Traxxas. For the most part, it is in Traxxas the agrarian class and the urban poor who undertake these things. Sometimes, as matters of ceremony and prestige, wealthier families will participate in the rituals and pageantry, as we saw in Calavan. But it, does not hold a lot of meaning for people of more, means.
Shock.
Having met more kinds of folks than maybe most have I ever met a monotheist before going to Democor?
Well, you've certainly met people who are less apathetic and more not anti-theist, but kind of indifferent in the Confluence. But you have probably met a handful of people who are you find perhaps in your experience, Dask, that people involved heavily in maritime trade break either very superstitious or very dismissive of the whole thing.
Sure. And in the Confluence, they would say that, to think there's one God is to call many things by one name, and I've asked them to explain, and they won't.
They probably would also say that to honor many gods is to repeat oneself.
They wouldn't explain that.
They're
I remember that one.
frustrating like that. Yeah. But within that spectrum of very superstitious to dismissive of superstition, you may have met a couple of people, particularly like at like second mate, quartermaster, around there, who revere a particular deity to the exclusion of others, a wind or a sea deity or something. It certainly has never been something that people have been eager to discuss with you, though. So that's probably just knowledge that there are people who do that, is probably as much as you got. There is not a sense, you don't have a read on whether or not they would have been hostile to the worship of other spirits and gods. But that idea is certainly unusual to Traxxan sensibilities, even if most people worship, or I guess I should say interact with 1 to 0 gods or deities. It's not because only one could be thought to be real or exist.
Sure. Yeah, my in-character response to Ramnet's crack about monotheism is to probably put my hand on his shoulder and say, yes, it wasn't simply a matter of there being one that was most important, or only one that's important, and I give his shoulder a squeeze. I say, the thought seemed to be to foster a belief in the people that none others existed.
For anybody, yes.
Which seemed blinkering, harsh, ambitious. It's hard to put a word to it.
And that's where the attack on Fury came from. Because there were these old deities that were people but also animals that seemed to exist in some spiritual plane that were everywhere and nowhere and emerged in these people when they became furious.
Ancestor veneration, I suppose.
Sure.
I mean, they were people, but also animals, but also
people.
Ghosts. They were a lot of things.
Ramnet has been leading you guys during this conversation on kind of a meandering path through the quiet city, and you haven't been paying a ton of attention, Dask and Lyssa, to where you are or are headed, and Ramnet, your primary thing has been just to have a kind of pleasant, semi-private walk, so you've been staying off of main thoroughfares, but not trying to be particularly squirrely or anything. But at an intersection near one of the canals, you hear out of the sort of corner of your attention off to one side what seems like kind of a muted squeak, followed by some rapid footfalls accompanied by a brightening light. And turning, you see that Kea is running full tilt toward Lyssa, and simply just like woof, impacts like directly into your midriff and gives you a big ol' hug, with her little personal light hovering along diffidently behind her.
Moxie!
And she mumbles something that is muffled entirely by Lyssa's abs. Any immediate reactions from our trio?
I probably make a pained groan when she launches onto me, but then return the hug warmly.
Excellent.
The last time we saw Kea was, if I recall correctly, something about a window being broken.
Mm-hmm.
Her hurling
Exactly.
herself through a window, yes. Yes, she was had become afflicted with the fear of the dark that has cropped up in some more cases since they've been gone even. She was among the first, although not the first. She was sort of round one of people to be thus afflicted, hence Moxie's presence. And leaning back just slightly from Lyssa, Kea beams up at you and says, "Oh, you're back! It's good to see you, Lyssa."
It's good to see you, Kay. I just got back. It was a time.
She sort of regards you a little critically and says, "If my ladyship don't mind my saying so, it seems that you haven't been taking very good care of yourself."
Well, I haven't had you around to help me with that.
I will murmur into
She-
Dask's ear. That seems to be common amongst the two of you.
You ought to see the
Kea,
other
for her part,
everyone. We've looked. I suppose we've taken the best care of each other that we could, but I look at both of us. I do accept the criticism.
Less critique and more concern.
Kea sort of gestures toward Moxie and says, "Well, milady Lyssa, you've certainly taken good care of me. I don't know what I'd have done without Moxie. He's the absolute envy of all of the Lightward. Oh, that's our name for those of us who, well, prefer to have some light around when we move around Fermata. It's hard, but we're there for each other. We get by."
Has it gotten better? Or do you,
She shrugs a shoulder.
or do you still fear the shadows?
She shrugs one shoulder and says, "The terror is always there waiting for me, I'm afraid, but I don't have to feel it much with Moxie around." And she sort of cups a hand underneath the little ball of light. Doesn't quite give it kind of like a little scritch like you would a pet, but the gesture feels similarly affectionate.
Throughout all of that, and particularly at the word Lightward, I have been gauging Ramnet's reaction as best I can.
Concern for Kaya in particular and the class of people described in general. Would Lightward be a new term for me, Adam?
It's the first time you haven't heard. It's not the first time you've heard the term, it's the first time you've heard the term self-applied.
Okay.
at that moment, from the direction that Kea approached you, you see coming around the corner another familiar figure. Thad has a little belt lantern on. It is nowhere near as effective or sophisticated as Moxie. It's a little bit of oil and wick insulated on the side that rests against his hip, and unshuttered elsewhere to kind of cast light ahead of and to one side of him. But otherwise his appearance seems, actually, now that you're looking at him and at Kea, not unchanged. It's subtle, but there's a little bit of uncanniness where you look and you recognize this is Thad, but then you kind of blink and shake your head a little bit because he seems, well, he's still buff, but he gives the impression of being lanky. And you could have sworn he had a little more color to him last time you saw him. Looking down at Kea, Lyssa, her dark kind of, shoulder blade length, wavy hair, seems, well, darker and a little straighter than the last time you saw it. And you have trouble putting your finger on it, but her eyes have always been, sort of big and bright, but they seem, well, not brighter, but bigger. She too seems a little paler. She was never dark complected, but she had kind of a rosiness to her that seems a little bit gone now. And in fact, now that you're noticing it on the two of them, it seems more or less universal, small, subtle changes, but thinking back along it, every person that you've seen in Fermata, save maybe Ramnet since you've been back, seems to be drifting a little bit towards the uncanny. The changes are small, and you probably wouldn't notice them, except that you've been gone. And coming back, you can kind of see that there's a kind of uncanny cast to people's features that you don't remember being there before. Maybe it's just your memory playing tricks on you, but Fermata is weird enough that you can't dismiss it entirely.
I'm going to do lesser divination using Realm.
Mm-hmm.
About the realm, or the aspect of darkness and what effect it's having around them.
Okay. Divination miracles, especially lesser divinations, the answer that you get is often, well, unpredictable in its delivery. Information is conveyed, but how it can be conveyed is really arbitrary. You're kind of used to this by this point. This realm miracle, though, you get kind of a sense. It's not a vision. It's not something that you see, but you get kind of a sense of Fermata itself as a photo negative of the sun, just kind of radiating this perfect darkness. And this might kind of be the Fermata equivalent of getting a tan, if you follow my analogy.
Okay.
It's far from definitive, but, ask a question about an uncanny cast, get a answer with an uncanny aspect.
Yeah. So not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Being pale and wan is all the rage these days.
Just ask Apatea.
Always Apatea, always pale, sometimes wan. I feel like I need a never in there now. Never sensible? I don't know. I'll work on it.
for when she endorses her line of hair products. Yeah, you got to get that
right.
Hmm.
Actually occurs to me, I don't think I ever described Apatia's hair, although you definitely would have seen it, because she was wearing her wimple at first, and then I never went back when she was taking it off. Oh well. We'll get there.
So I probably just wave at that and greet him warmly, but with an air of politeness and distance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he looks a little surprised to see you as he kind of hurries over, and he gives you like a friendly little bow. And it's like, "Oh, Milady Lyssa, you're back. It's great to see you. I see that Kea found you. She's been worried about you, I think. Are you okay?"
I've been better. So you're one of the Light Word now?
Oh, yeah, I guess that is kind of the name that's taken hold. Yeah, no, I was real messed up about it at first, I guess, but... Well, actually, he looks fondly down at Kea. It was Kea who found me, like, God, it's embarrassing, just kind of like curled up at a little ball wailing outside of this one house. And, well, there's enough of us now that we kind of look out for each other. So she kind of brought me to where some folks helped set me up with this little dude. He pats his lantern and then goes, and kind of like sucks on his finger a little bit where he seems to have burned it against the glass of the lantern. And goes, and things are a little easier now. But yeah, it's kind of a bummer, but you know, as one of us kind of brought up recently, it's maybe not like super surprising if you never really see natural light that you kind of maybe have a reaction sometimes. I don't know. They had like a real cool way of saying it. I'm not that great with words, but yeah, it was seemed reasonable. I don't know. Kind of sucked at first, but I'm doing all right. And that's enough about me. What happened to your head? Are you okay? Oh, man. Can I see the other guy?
There's not much left of them, I suspect.
He goes, oh, and kind of like covers his mouth. And he goes, up top.
I don't leave him hanging and give him a high five. But I might intentionally hold it a little extra high, so he really has to reach for it.
Your ploy works, and he really has to reach for it, but he does so pretty gladly. Kea has, in the meantime, taken a step back from you, although she leaves kind of one hand resting, like kind of along your waist. And she says, "That's right, Thad was, well, my first real contribution. After you left, I was doing better than most," and she kind of gestures toward Moxie again. "But, well, I felt like it was maybe something that kind of was wrong with me." She blushes a little and, you know, looks kind of ashamed and says, "But there are enough of us, and enough of us are different in enough ways that it seems kind of just to happen, and, well, we've tried to make our peace with it. Bringing some light doesn't seem to offend the Obsidian God too much, so we make our way." And she kind of nods with great equanimity.
Is there any commonalities between you? Like where you were first afflicted by fear of darkness? Like Thad mentioned he was outside of a house and you came out of a window?
She nods a little bit. She says, "Really, the main commonality, I think, is..." And Thad interrupts her and goes, "We all forgot." He seems like really proud of this. And there's kind of a beat. And he goes, "No, like seriously, we were all... Once we were aware..." And he kind of trails off and looks around a little furtively. He goes, "Once it had happened, I guess, we all realized we didn't remember exactly what, like, the beginning was." It's hard to say because, well, we like don't remember it. But yeah, I guess a lot of us are kind of, you know, pick back up in our memories around like some house or something. But it's not like the same place. You know, like that would have been obvious.
I kind of nod and then look down to Kea and say, well, now that I'm back, once I have an opportunity to just rest up, I promise you that I will get to the bottom of this. And I run a finger along the bottom of her chin.
She grins nearly as brightly as Moxie and says, I'm so very glad you're back, milady. Will you be staying? For a while, I mean.
Until the big they-them Elstare says otherwise.
She nods and says, I suppose that's the way it has to go. But, well, I don't want to keep you from your rest, but, well, I hope to see you at the nightcap. I'm doing my shifts there again. And she kind of looks a little proud of that.
The nightcap hasn't been the same without you, so I'm glad to hear that.
She gives another big smile with a little bit of a blush and, kind of throws herself into another big hug, which you manage to not make a sound, but you kind of like grit your teeth some to kind of stay solid through, and then she bobs you what could best be described a cheeky curtsy.
A wink.
Her flush deepens and she gives you a wave that rides the line between affectionate and coy as she motions to Thad and says, Right, well, we'll be late if we're not off to the meeting soon, so I'll give you regards to the rest of the Lightward, milady, milord, prophet. And she gives a small curtsy on each salutation, and they
I will
head off.
Nod sort of at her wake, I suppose, not having had terribly much to contribute.
Yeah, I incline my head as well, and as they remove themselves from earshot, I ask Ramnet, is that the light word? Is that a common thread for you lately, professionally? I mean,
it's a professional awareness. Not really so much more than that, as there isn't really so much to do that I know of. It's one of the many and varied balls that Aveen has managed to keep in the air herself while you've been away. I will leave that deliberately open-ended.
Well, I suppose we're here now. We can help you juggle, not alone, if I'm following the metaphor.
Hopefully, yes. I will sort of use the arm that I have on Dask's back to sort of pull him close to my side.
As he moves with your sort of pull, he reveals standing alarmingly close behind him an acolyte who has just been standing there silently for goodness knows how long.
Timothy!
The acolyte sort of clasps their hands and bows slightly and says, My lord, milady. Sir Prophet, your presence is requested back in the manifestation. There are many supplicants awaiting your attention. Another little bow, this one somehow managing to convey smugness.
In the manifestation?
No response from the acolyte.
There have been more supplicants since you've been gone.
Oh. Well, I suppose I don't work from home either. Bit more of a commute for me sometimes. I should stop talking. Are you needed? Is this urgent? Or is this all the time?
I suppose it's chiefly a question of to whom it would be urgent, but...
The acolyte bows.
I suspect further it's a matter of by whom, again, I would be needed, but we should probably at least trend back that way.
The acolyte bows again and begins to head toward the manifestation at their usual very medium pace.
Thank you, Timothy.
No response.
We will set our own damn pace.
Fair enough. Is there anything in particular that you wish to do or discuss on your way toward the manifestation?
I think since we've unloaded on Ramnet about everything that's happened to us, this would be where I ask him how things have been here, which we the players and you the listeners have heard more of than we would have. So I think this is where we get caught up on all that in character.
Yeah, this is where I let slip my frustrations about a variety of things and people.
I am listening sympathetically, getting irrationally angry at those who I feel have wronged him in the course of the story, and also listening for what has not yet been confirmed to me personally, which is that he has sort of been on unusually good behavior while I've been gone. And hearing no hints to the contrary, I assume I'm like my indignation on his behalf is peppered with relief on my own.
At length, you come into the plaza in front of the manifestation, which is trafficked, if not especially heavily. And as you sort of come to a stop in front of the steps, Ramnet, you hear a familiar voice, a deep one, say, "There you are." And turning, you see a gentleman with whom you had a brief and enjoyable fling some 3 months ago. Standing there, not to say dressed to the nines would be misleading. He's not dressed formally, but he is dressed immaculately. And he's giving you a rakish smile. And he says, "You're late."
Late for what? You'll pardon me if I'm a bit confused.
He blinks for a moment and says, "Sorry, perhaps it's my mistake." And he fishes a piece of paper out of a pocket of his waistcoat and opens it and says, "No, I thought this was pretty clear." And he turns it to show it to you. It is a folded piece of paper written in, at the very least, a passable imitation of your handwriting that says, "Sorry I've been so busy lately, but if you'll stop by the manifestation, I'd be happy to speak with you." The ellipsis is in your note. And it has your name signed on it. You have no recollection of ever writing this.
I stand in silence, a being of pure physicalized side-eye.
I clasp my hand on Dask's shoulder and give it a reassuring squeeze.
As all of that is happening, I'm looking at this with increasing confusion, and I fear that there is something odd going on that is, at best, a passable imitation of my handwriting. I am fairly certain, to the degree that anyone can be certain around here where time is slippery, that I did not write that myself, as I am lately otherwise occupied. But and at that I nod to the fact that my arm is very particularly around Dask.
The gentleman sort of smirks a little bit and says, "Right, of course. Sorry, this is really embarrassing."
No, I don't think it should be embarrassing for you, unless, of course, you were the one who wrote that, at which point I compliment you on, I suppose, on your skill at my handwriting. This is probably where I charm plus fascinate as a way to navigate this conversation with a minimum of potential recrimination.
Certainly. Dask, you were trying to give a reaction there as well.
Oh yeah, I was going to say this is not mechanically correct, but as an in-character decision, I assume the aspect of malevolent arm candy.
Malevolent arm candy.
Like on a pair of two...
This is what's wrong with...
Go ahead.
A pair of twos?
Of twos, which with the master die becomes 3 twos, which with ornamentally pretty becomes 3 sevens.
Indeed. In the meantime, I was going to say, Dask, that made me think of just like a anthropomorphic atomic warhead on someone's arm.
Are we talking about the candy? Or like...
Yes, the candy.
I saw
the candy that I used to buy at the Little League ballpark and made my tongue bleed.
Yeah.
Speaking of bleeding tongues, I saw Sour Patch Kids.
Yeah.
I definitely abused Sour Patch Kids earlier in life, for sure. Yeah.
Since there is no such thing as Salty Patch Kids. Sorry. I'll see myself out.
And what is the rating of this podcast?
Do podcasts have ratings?
I don't think they do.
I'm very confused.
Me too.
There's explicit and there's I guess implicit, not explicit.
Yes, there's text and there's subtext.
Yeah, exactly.
The two genders.
Way to bring that back around.
My pronouns are a series of footnotes.
Oh man. In any case,
that's the best. The two genders I've heard in quite a while.
It's very good. In any case, Ramnet, you feel relatively confident in your navigation of this sticky situation, and the gentleman seems to have a variety of reactions very quickly. Embarrassment, irritation, confusion, but pockets the note and leans forward to your ear opposite the side that Dask is standing on, and murmurs, "Well, whatever, but you know where to find me, and, well, your friend isn't bad looking if he's looking for an upgrade," and walks off in a little bit of a huff. But it's about as cleanly as you can imagine having gotten away from this.
Yeah.
The note is still something of a mystery.
Well.
I am choosing to believe that you are genuinely as confused by this as I am.
Is that a statement? or is that a description of character status?
I think I say that because I'm an idiot. That part I don't say.
The because I'm an idiot part.
I mean, that would be correct. You can choose to believe that or not, but...
You've never given me a reason not to trust you. Well, you know what I am, a bundle of doubts about everything, but you've never given me the slightest reason to doubt you. That just was strange.
It was a bit awkward at the end as well, going from being propositioned on a relatively presumptive basis to suggesting that you could perhaps find an upgrade from me to him.
At this I guffaw, like an actual... And I noticed that can I still see this guy as he's huffing away?
Sure, he's, a little ways from turning a corner.
Okay. There's a ghost miracle, and whatever paving stone he was about to step on briefly isn't there, so that he stumbles ever so slightly.
He does stumble a little bit, and as he continues walking, glances back in consternation at the paving stone that's clearly there. But,
It does
continues
raise
on his
The
way.
level of that miracle was petty. Please continue.
Are there bugs in Fermata?
Ooh, you know what? You have not seen a bug in Fermata.
Oh.
It's a shame. It's
I
a real
like
shame.
how disappointed you are.
Are there stray cats?
Yes.
I'm seeing the man stumble, and I imagine I felt the miraculous energy from Dask.
You certainly could have.
I'm going to do a lesser creation of fury and any nearby cats directed towards that man and his immaculate clothing. And how can he wear such finery when they have to live in the streets, when they should be worshipped as gods? Because,
All right.
cat.
Command Inspire, your penalty die for being extremely tired will basically transmute your master die, in this case, into a normal die. So you have 2 dice to roll.
Ugh. I'm going to use Lucky on this because
It's funny.
Okay. Why not?
Still
No.
no matches. I just really want to see him ambushed by feral cats.
Well, he disappears around the corner before you can see what's happening, but you do hear a bunch of yowling from a little ways off. So it's kind of like when somebody cuts me off in traffic, and I imagine that as soon as they're out of sight, their entire engine explodes because of karmic justice, and I'll never know better that didn't happen. You can easily imagine that he is thus assailed. Whether or not it is true, you may never know.
I straighten my hair.
It doesn't work. So yeah, you're at the steps of the manifestation. The acolyte arrived before you and is now moving at a very maddeningly steady pace between the doors to the manifestation and where you are standing, Ramnet. Just back and forth as you stand there. Well, all this transpires too.
Oh, he's a puppy.
I assumed that was out loud.
Yes.
No, none
I
of
was
none
waiting
of
for the
that.
acolyte to respond to being called.
No,
upon.
none of that was in character. I'm not going to invite professional disaster by these implacable and unresponsive forces in the shape of people
Sure.
who, have at least one extremely awkward personal admirer.
So anyway, peace has more or less returned to the steps of the manifestation, other than this acolyte oscillating.
I wonder if we could generate power this way.
Oscillating Acolyte would be a great band name.
It would. The oscillating oxalotl acolyte. I couldn't even do it. I tried. We'll just move on. Pretend to. So we're here.
We're here.
Yes.
Ramnet doesn't want to go back to work. This is immediately apparent to all involved.
And yet the acolyte oscillates.
E por si mueve.
I would remove this task from your plate if I could. I can tell you would rather do nearly anything else.
I mean, mostly it's that you've been gone really a while. Out of character, remind me, Adam, if there is actual time dilation at work. Such that, apparent for them may not be apparent for me.
I mean, in terms of out-of-character knowledge, like, it hasn't come up yet. That, it is entirely possible that you have experienced more time than they have, but none of you will know until that comes up.
Fair enough.
He says you've really been gone a long time. How long has it been as far as we're concerned? It's been... We figured out the calendar during this voyage, so...
Right, well, and I'm trying to catch up to it to be precise, but I think that you have been gone about 2 weeks from your time.
Yeah. So I say, 2 weeks by my count, which, don't get me wrong, is much too long.
So this then begs then the question of how long for me, Adam?
This is one of those rare instances where I get to make a roll on a player's behalf.
Mm.
Will you tell us what you're rolling?
Nope. But I will tell you that I got 666, so I will need to increment that counter in our show notes. This assertion of 2 weeks brings you up short because it feels inaccurate, but on reflection, you are unable to count the precise days. You can remember things that happened, but you have a lot of trouble placing them like these were on the same day, this was 2 days later. You've got a chronology, but no hash marks in your timeline.
I will endeavor to explain that, possibly with reference to the inherent difficulty of marking days in a place where there aren't days to be marked.
Indeed.
Certainly. You measure your time and, I gesture it at the oscillating acolyte.
We could make a clock out of that.
There are now 2 acolytes oscillating in alternation so that one is near you and one is at the door at any given time. And you can see another one coming across the square.
It's oddly adorable.
It's probably intended to be threatening. I will suggest that 2 weeks seems plausible as a number, but it feels like it's been longer, and I don't know how to categorize that. It seems like time may be strange.
Time is undoubtedly strange. Here more than elsewhere, but everywhere. And look, I don't have as much control as I'd like over where I go and when I go there and how long it takes, but I can promise to do everything I can not to be away so long.
I ascribe no fault.
Hey, it may be because I've been hit in the head, but here's a notion for you from Aunt Lyssa. What if I work this shift for you, so you two can get time to catch up, and then I just get some meet and greet sessions in with the occupants of Fermata?
How is this received by the acolytes?
They don't react.
This is the best idea.
This is marvelous, Rob, and I wholeheartedly support this.
You had just suggested that you could maybe take Ramnet's shift, as it were, to no response from the acolytes.
Well, I can't think of any reason why this isn't a good idea.
Well, if you were willing, then it would be a great kindness of you.
I volunteered, and you gave me coffee.
Oh, shit. Oh, what could possibly go wrong?
Is Lyssa thrumming?
As thrumming as someone can be on the artificial high of caffeine after exhaustion.
After a literal battle.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I think then that Dask and I turned toward my house. Do the acolytes continue to oscillate toward me, or is Lyssa an acceptable substitute?
So until you're gone from the square, they seem to be kind of trying to lead you in, but as Lyssa goes in, they sort of, the ones that you can see, just wander in various directions and are gone from sight. Lyssa, as you go in, an acolyte sort of sweeps up behind you from nowhere. You saw them coming and puts a relatively formal black wool robe over your shoulders. It's the first time you've seen an expression on one of their faces other than just kind of blank neutrality, and it is a slightly more displeased form of blank neutrality. The difference between like the open eyes, flat mouth, smiley face and the like flat eye, flat mouth smiley. To give a thoroughly too much on the internet analogy. And you are led respectfully but firmly to a seat at the top of the altar. The manifestation has quite a lot of seating in it, and it is mostly full. The very first person is not seated, though. He is walking in a small circle in front of the spot where he should be seated in the front row of the pews. You can see as you walk past him and into the seat that his eyes are wide and terrified. His face is pale. Tears are streaking his face. His clothes are torn and dirty, and he is muttering to himself. As soon as the acolyte gestures him toward the top of the altar, he throws himself sort of onto his knees and prostrates himself into the steps. So, like, he tries to kowtow, but basically, like, flops onto the stairs. And he begins to shout at you hysterically. Now, it's hard for you to process this all at once, but if you were just seeing him and not hearing him, you would swear that he's panicking about something dire happening to him or a loved one. But what he's actually saying are snarled and shouted graphic descriptions of the violence and torment he wishes to inflict upon you. However, it is delivered with the tearful urgency of a distraught father imploring a town physician to come look at his sick child.
You see the shit I sometimes have to put
I
up
look...
with.
I look at the acolyte and I'm like, is this normal?
The acolyte does not even turn in your direction to look at you.
It seems like you don't have full control of what you're saying. And I seem very proud with myself for coming up with this theory.
He nods tearfully while screaming at the top of his lungs about consuming your aorta.
Oh, it's okay. Sometimes I drink too much and then I say stuff that I really don't mean. So it seems like you might be holding something back and you're taking out your fury on something else. Can I do and just start slinging miracles here.
But you lack an experience. You make up for it. I mean, all of it, really.
So that would be a change, which I don't have any miracle points for. Can I do a lesser creation of fury in the air immediately around him to make it so loud that until this element passes, all of his threats are not particularly audible?
Interesting. So you would be ginning up fury in the air itself.
Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
it would not carry his words.
Okay. This is going to be one of them Command Inspire rolls. Which, with a penalty die, is 2 dice.
Ah! Surprising no matches. I got an 8 and a 4.
Okay. You manage to whip up a breeze around him. It's not... That sounds very gentle. He is basically standing in the center of a... noticeable, but not rapid enough to be dangerous miniature cyclone. He looks a little bewildered, but stops speaking for a minute.
It'll make it harder for people to hear what you're saying that you're not intending to say.
With the basic tone and demeanor of somebody saying, thanks, I guess, he threatens to reach down your throat and pull out your stomach.
You're welcome, and maybe, I guess Ramnet always says things like this, so maybe you reflect on how Mott would want you to use your words.
He gives you a slightly awkward and hesitant bow, and snarls at you, that he will make sure you perceive only darkness once your head is within your sternum, milady.
Oh, this is like some great fury. Like, fury is in the domain of Mott. And just, be careful who you approach this next week and ensure that they don't have any weapons on them.
He backs slowly away, seeming a little bit calmer, if not less afflicted, and says in an even and humble tone that your Achilles tendons would make great bowstrings.
I do have long legs.
And he leaves, and I want from you a let's say for the remainder of these sense plus empathy roll, just to see how you do in aggregate.
Much depends on this roll.
It's 3 dice.
And still no matches.
Alright, what was your high die?
4.
Okay. By the time the acolytes shepherd you out of the manifestation, you've seen probably 20 of these supplicants, and they are all very respectful. None of them quite as bracing as that first guy. Some of the problems you were able to just say like, oh, yeah, I get it. And give them some just like general advice. Some of them you basically punted on, like with the first guy, and others the acolytes kind of gave you some side eye on. But you don't feel like any of the consequences will be quite as dire as that first one for fucking it up. There isn't as much riding on them, so you feel like you've been okay. If there is anything specific other than just like a really nice evening catching up and being, kind of close and affectionate, that Dask and Ramnet get up to, we can get a little bit of that now, but in the interest of time, we should probably summarize.
Well, so we're back in Ramnet's house. I comment on how nice it is to see things not set up for work but for leisure, but that it seems you haven't had much of that lately.
Minimal, yes. So there's everything at the manifestation, and then there's everything to do with making sure that Avine's balls remain in the air.
Well, any of that burden that I can take on, I'm more than willing. And if you'd rather not think about it for a while, that's possibly something else I can provide.
I think for tonight, the latter of those. Let's just be here.
Nothing could possibly be better.
And so you are just there. You have a relatively low-key evening, which suits both of you, especially Dask, given he's very worn ragged. Just fine. And indeed, Dask, you at some point sort of just doze off and your head kind of plunk onto Ramnet's shoulder where you were sitting. And when you do awake, it will probably be at Ramnet's in our next session. But what I'd like to end on is Lyssa. As you are finishing up in the manifestation and the acolytes are ushering you out, an acolyte accompanied by someone who is relatively in the profile of like a page are waiting right outside the door on the steps, and behind them is a group of people. Most of them are remarkable only for the strangeness of their dress. These are men and women wearing sort of hip-length leather vests without sleeves and with a sort of deep V in the front and apparently on their backs, and some kind of unfamiliar cloth as well, kind of a skirt. The uniform does not vary with gender. They are all barefoot. However, those seem to be the attendants, because in front of them are a man and a woman, tall, not as tall as you, sort of sun dark, with dark eyes, dark hair, and very confident airs. And most importantly, they have Octoritas's. They, upon seeing you, bow very slightly and say, or rather the woman says, "We thank you for your welcome here in the City of Darkness, O Lady of the Obsidian God." And that's where we'll end our session.
Thanks for taking my shift, Lyssa.
Yeah, really.
There might only be a handful of fires to put out later.
Worth it.
I didn't want to break the flow because the business with the acolyte and the cloak was so good, but I will retcon briefly that as we were walking away from Lyssa, I said, "You are the truest and often the most surprising friend that I think I've ever had."
Aww.
So cute.
Well, you guys can all have one mortal experience point.
Yay!
I don't think any problems or anything came up this time. And that will conclude this session of Dice Punks. Thanks for joining us. I hope our players and listeners enjoyed it as much as I did, and that you'll join us again next time. If you're hearing us now, then you probably know where to listen to this, but we can be found almost any place one can listen to podcasts, as well as on the wider web at dicepunks.com and on Twitter as @dicepunks. With that, I think we're ready to say farewell. Say goodbye to the kind folks at home, players.
Thanks for listening, and never underestimate the value and the importance of a quiet evening at home.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, you can always fake it until you make it.
Thanks for listening, folks. And keep very good track of your handwriting and who else knows how to use it.
And as the poet once said, "We are the city where the lights come on and they never go out." Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in, and stick around through the admin stuff. There's a Ramnet prophecy waiting for you at the end of it. The songs in this episode, theme of the Dice Punks and its acoustic version, were written and recorded by the Regal of Nothing himself, Drew. Cover art is by Joanne, illustrious spooks mistress of our Halloween one-shot. Site design and graphics for dicepunks.com are by Robin, the player behind Lyssa, the irrepressible Duchess of Fury. Rain and the one-roll engine it runs on were created by Greg Stolze, whose work can be found in a frankly astonishing number of cool places, but I'll point you toward gregstolze.com. Nobilis was created by Jenna Caterin Moran and can be found alongside much of her other really intriguing work both in and outside of tabletop role-playing at afarandsunlessland.wordpress.com. Links to both systems and authors can be found on the Punk Grimoire section of our website, dicepunks.com. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, well, that's reward enough on its own, really, but if you're so inclined, you can help us out by rating and reviewing us wherever you listen to us, telling your friends who you think would like us to give us a listen, and even by heading over to our Patreon at patreon.com/dicepunks. We have fun rewards available to backers, including a patron-only Discord and access to the Dice Peaks after show for episodes 1 and following. Regardless, we hope you'll tune in again, and until then, remember, subtlety is for cowards.
What is a light but a secret revealed? A secret is naturally unpleasant, and if you cannot see it, you can pretend it is not there. Reality is a secret, dear supplicant, and you should pretend it is not there. Hold high the obsidian god, dear worshipper, and they shall hide reality from you.